Morning, Marcus. Put those down for me.
What's
Just need
this
to see your
about?
ID.
All right, hold on. Here.
Thank you. Marcus Rivers, parole check. Step outside with me.
Outside? I'm just dropping off
Turn
supplies,
around,
man.
hands behind your
Come
back.
on, what?
Warrant for parole violation. You're under arrest.
This is crazy.
We'll talk outside. Watch your step.
The front door chime rang at 5:52 in the morning. Marcus Whitley stood near the counter in his gray hoodie, keys jangling on the carabiner clipped to his belt loop. He had been unloading boxes since 5:15, stacking napkins and coffee filters and syrup containers near the kitchen. The delivery truck had come early, and Marcus had met it the way he met every morning for 11 years alone, reliable, present. He assumed the chime meant Jerry, his line cook, had arrived ahead of schedule. But when Marcus turned toward the dining area, he found a police officer standing just inside the doorway. The officer was young. His uniform looked stiff, creased in all the right places. One hand rested on his duty belt. His eyes moved slowly across the room, scanning the stacked chairs, the dimmed lights, the black man in casual clothes standing behind the register. "We're not open yet," Marcus said. The officer didn't acknowledge the statement. Instead, he took a step forward, his boots heavy on the tile floor. "You work here?" Marcus felt the first flicker of something familiar. Something he had learned to recognize over 47 years of living in a body that made certain people uncomfortable. "I own it," Marcus replied. The officer's expression didn't change. Not a flicker of acknowledgement. Not a nod. Nothing. "I'm gonna need to see some ID." Marcus stared at him. "For what?" "Just need to verify who you are. We got a call about suspicious activity in the area." Suspicious activity. Marcus had heard those words before. He had heard them when he was 19, sitting in his own car outside his mother's house. He had heard them when he was 32, walking through a department store in a suit and tie. He had heard them so many times that the phrase had lost all meaning except one: "You don't belong here. Prove that you do." Marcus pulled his wallet from his pocket and handed over his driver's license. The officer studied it, looking back and forth between the photo and Marcus's face. Finally, he handed it back. "This your place?" the officer asked again. "Like I said." The officer walked deeper into the diner. He peered into the kitchen. He ran his hand along the edge of a booth like he was checking for dust. He moved behind the counter without asking permission, his eyes cataloging everything. Marcus stood still, arms crossed, watching a stranger treat his life's work like a crime scene. "You got a permit for this place?" "Of course I do." "I'm gonna need to see it." Marcus exhaled slowly. 11 years. 11 years of 5:45 mornings. 11 years of knowing every regular by name, knowing their orders before they sat down. 11 years of building something real in a town that didn't always make space for men who looked like him. And now this. A boy in a badge demanding proof that Marcus had earned the right to exist in his own building. "It's in the back office," Marcus said. "I'll get it." He returned with a framed business license. His name was printed clearly across the top: Marcus Whitley, Corner Booth Diner, Greenville, South Carolina. The officer barely glanced at it. His name was Brendan Cole. 23 years old. 4 months out of the police academy. He had graduated near the middle of his class, received average marks on his evaluations, and displayed what one instructor had privately described as overconfidence without corresponding judgment. None of that appeared in his official file. It was the kind of observation that got spoken in hallways but never written down. Cole had made 2 other stops in the months since earning his badge. Both involved black business owners. One was a restaurant owner questioned about being inside his own establishment after hours. The other was a barbershop owner detained for matching a description while sweeping his own sidewalk. Both men had filed complaints. Both complaints had been reviewed and dismissed. The pattern existed. The department simply chose not to see it. Now Cole stood in Marcus Whitley's diner, staring at boxes stacked near the kitchen door. "What's in those?" "Supplies," Marcus said. "Delivered this morning." "You mind if I take a look?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He knew what was happening. He knew exactly what was happening. And he knew that compliance would not protect him, because compliance never protected men like him. It only delayed the inevitable accusation. "Yeah, actually, I do mind." Cole's hand moved slightly toward his belt. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable. A reminder of who held power in this room. "Sir, I'm asking nicely." Marcus met his eyes. "And I'm telling you nicely that you don't have a reason to search my property." The tension thickened. Cole stepped closer, his voice dropping to something harder. "You being uncooperative makes me think you've got something to hide." "I don't have anything to hide," Marcus said. "I have rights." What Marcus didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that a security camera installed above the diner's back door had been recording since 5:15 that morning. Marcus had installed it 2 months earlier after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. He had mounted it himself, angled it toward the parking lot, and tested it twice to make sure the footage was clear. The camera captured everything. Cole entering through the unlocked front door. Marcus providing identification calmly. Cole's repeated questions. The moment Cole accused a man of trespassing in his own business. And one detail that would matter more than anything else. Cole glancing up at the camera, noticing it, and deliberately positioning himself to block its view during key moments. He knew the camera was there. He thought he could hide what he was doing. He was wrong. Cole's voice grew harder. "I think you need to step outside." Marcus blinked. "What?" "I said step outside. I'm not convinced this is your establishment." Marcus stood completely still. He had shown his driver's license. He had shown his business license with his name printed on it. He had answered every question. He had done everything a citizen is supposed to do when confronted by law enforcement. And none of it mattered. "You're detaining me?" Marcus asked. "In my own diner?" "I have reasonable suspicion to detain you until we sort this out." Reasonable suspicion. The phrase sounded official. It sounded legal. It was designed to sound that way: clinical, procedural, beyond challenge. But Marcus understood what those words really meant. They meant that a 23-year-old officer had decided that a black man in a hoodie did not look like a business owner. They meant that identification and documentation and 11 years of history counted for nothing against the weight of assumption. "Step outside. Now." Marcus walked toward the door. He kept his hands visible. He moved slowly, deliberately, the way he had been taught to move since he was old enough to understand that sudden gestures could be interpreted as threats. He pushed through the front door and felt the cold March air hit his face. The sun had not fully risen. The streetlights still glowed amber across the empty parking lot. Cole followed close behind. Hands on the hood of the vehicle. The patrol car sat at the curb, engine still running. Marcus approached it and placed his palms flat against the metal. The hood was cold. The kind of cold that seeps through skin and settles in bone. He stared at his own reflection in the windshield, distorted, fragmented, unrecognizable. A car passed on the street. The driver slowed down, staring through the window at the scene. A black man pressed against a police cruiser at 6 in the morning. No context. No explanation. Just an image that told its own story, true or not. Cole stood behind Marcus, one hand still resting on his belt. He radioed for backup. His voice was calm, almost casual, like this was routine. Like humiliating a man in front of his own business was just another Tuesday. Marcus kept his eyes forward. His pulse drummed in his ears. He thought about the regulars who would arrive in an hour. He thought about what they would see if this continued: their friend, their neighbor, the man who remembered their coffee orders, treated like a criminal on his own sidewalk. He thought about his father, who had owned a small repair shop in this same town for 26 years. His father, who had been stopped 14 times while driving to and from work. His father, who had taught Marcus the rules: speak clearly, move slowly, never give them a reason. His father, who had followed every rule and still ended up face down on the pavement one summer evening in 1994. Marcus had been 12 years old. He had watched from the front porch. Now, at 47, he stood in almost the same position. Different decade. Different officer. Same weight pressing against his shoulders. 2 additional patrol cars arrived within minutes. Sergeant Linda Vasquez stepped out of the first one. She had been with the Greenville Police Department for 14 years. She walked toward the scene with measured steps, her eyes moving between Cole and Marcus. "What's going on here, Cole?" Cole straightened. "Possible trespassing." Subject claims he owns the diner, but I'm not buying it. Vasquez looked at Marcus. She looked at the diner behind him, the sign that read, Corner Booth Diner, in faded red letters, the same sign that had hung there for over a decade. She looked back at Cole. Did he provide ID? Yeah, but did the ID match the name on the business license? Cole hesitated. His jaw tightened. Yes, but then what's the problem? The question hung in the air. Cole's face reddened. He searched for words, for some justification that would hold up under scrutiny. But there was nothing. There had never been anything except assumption dressed up as instinct. He was unloading boxes through the back door at 5:30 in the morning, Cole said finally. It looked suspicious. Vasquez turned to Marcus. Mr. Whitley, is that correct? You're the owner? Yes, ma'am, Marcus said quietly. You're free to go. Marcus lifted his hands from the hood. He stood upright slowly, feeling the ache in his lower back from being bent forward. He did not look at Cole. He did not speak. He simply walked back toward the front door of his diner, pushed it open, and disappeared inside. Behind him, Cole stood on the sidewalk with his fists clenched, watching. Vasquez said something to him, words Marcus couldn't hear, and Cole's posture stiffened. The other officer, Darrell Hunt, avoided eye contact with everyone. Marcus went to the kitchen. He stood in front of the industrial sink and gripped the edge of the counter. His hands were shaking. Not from fear. From rage. The kind of rage that has no outlet, no target, no resolution. The kind of rage that men like Marcus learn to swallow because expressing it only makes things worse. The diner opened at 5:45, as it always did. Jerry arrived at 6:10, apologizing for running late. The regulars filtered in throughout the morning, unaware that anything had happened. Marcus poured coffee and took orders and smiled when he was supposed to smile. But something had shifted. Something that could not be unshifted. 3 days later, a citation arrived in the mail. The charges were disorderly conduct and failure to comply with a lawful order. The fine was $320. Marcus read the paper twice, then a third time. He had complied with every instruction. He had never raised his voice. He had done nothing wrong. And now the system that had humiliated him demanded that he pay for the privilege. Marcus could have paid the fine. $320 was not going to break him. He could have written the check, mailed it in, and moved on with his life. That was what the system expected. That was what the system was designed to encourage: quiet acceptance, path of least resistance, let it go and hope it never happens again. But Marcus could not let it go. He called the police department. He asked to speak with someone about the citation. He was transferred 3 times before reaching a desk sergeant who listened to his complaint with audible impatience. Sir, if you want to contest the citation, you can appear in court on the date listed. I'm not asking about court, Marcus said. I'm asking why I received a citation for standing inside my own business. That's a matter for the courts to decide. No, that's a matter of a police officer fabricating charges against me. Silence on the line. Then, is there anything else I can help you with today? Marcus hung up. He sat in his back office, staring at the framed business license on the wall. His name was right there. Black letters on white paper. Proof that he existed, that he belonged, that he had built something real. And it meant nothing to the man who had walked through his front door 3 days earlier. He thought about the 2 options in front of him. Pay the fine and let Brendan Cole believe he had won. Or fight back and risk everything that comes with challenging a police department in a town where men like Marcus were expected to stay quiet. He picked up the phone again and dialed a different number. Simone Grant answered on the 3rd ring. She was a civil rights attorney based in Columbia, 45 minutes north of Greenville. She had spent 18 years handling cases exactly like this one, cases where the facts were clear but the system was not interested in clarity. Marcus told her everything. The early morning delivery. The officer appearing without cause. The ID and business license that meant nothing. The cold hood of the patrol car. The citation that arrived 3 days later like a reminder of who held power. Simone listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, she asked one question. Do you have any documentation? Witnesses? Anything beyond your account? Marcus paused. He had almost forgotten. "I have a security camera," he said. "Above the back door. It records 24 hours. Simone's voice changed. Something sharpened in her tone. "Have you reviewed the footage?" "Not yet." "Do that tonight. Save it to multiple locations. Don't tell anyone else about it." Marcus did exactly what she instructed. That evening, after the diner closed, he pulled up the footage on his office computer. He watched himself unload boxes at 5:15. He watched Officer Cole enter through the front door at 5:52. He watched the entire encounter play out in grainy black and white, the questions, the demands, the moment Cole told him to step outside. And he watched Cole glance up at the camera, notice it, and shift his position to block the lens during key moments of the confrontation. Cole had known. Cole had tried to hide his actions. Cole had failed. Simone filed a formal request for all body cam footage from the morning of March 12th. The Greenville Police Department responded within 2 weeks. According to their records, Officer Cole's body cam had malfunctioned that morning. No footage was available. Simone did not accept the answer. She filed a Freedom of Information Act request for dispatch records, radio logs, and all documentation related to calls received on March 12 between 5 o'clock and 7 a.m. The response arrived 4 weeks later. It contained a single devastating detail. There had been no call about suspicious activity. Dispatch records showed 0 calls placed to the Greenville Police Department regarding the area around Corner Booth Diner that morning. Officer Cole had not responded to a complaint. He had not been directed to the location. He had fabricated the entire justification for entering Marcus's diner and demanding identification. But Simone found more. A technician's report from the department's Equipment Maintenance Division revealed that Cole's body cam had not malfunctioned. The device had been manually disabled. Cole had pressed a specific sequence of buttons before entering the diner, a sequence that any trained officer would recognize as intentional. He had turned off the camera on purpose. He had lied about it afterward. And the department had repeated that lie without investigation. Marcus sat in Simone's office in Columbia, reading the documents spread across her desk. His hands were steady now. The rage had transformed into something colder, something more focused. "What happens next?" he asked. Simone leaned back in her chair. "We file a federal lawsuit. Unlawful detention. False arrest. Racial profiling. Abuse of power. We name Cole, and we name the department." "Will it work?" "It will work because you have what most people don't have," Simone said. "Proof. A camera that Cole didn't know was recording clearly. Dispatch records that contradict his story. A technician's report that proves he disabled his body cam intentionally." She paused. "This isn't about convincing a jury that you're telling the truth. This is about showing them that he lied repeatedly and the system helped him do it." Marcus nodded slowly. "How long will it take?" "Months. Maybe a year. They'll try to delay. They'll try to settle quietly. They'll try to make this go away without admitting fault." "I don't want it to go away," Marcus said. "I want everyone to know what happened." Simone smiled for the first time since they had met. "Then we make sure they do." The lawsuit forced doors open that had been closed for years. Internal Affairs launched an investigation into Officer Brendan Cole, and what they found extended far beyond a single morning in March. 2 other incidents surfaced. Both involved black business owners. Both followed the same pattern. The first was a man named Derek Hollis, who owned a small restaurant on the east side of Greenville. 8 months before Marcus's encounter, Cole had questioned Derek about being inside his own establishment at 10:30 p.m. Derek had been cleaning up after a private event. Cole demanded identification, accused Derek of breaking and entering, and threatened arrest before a neighboring business owner intervened and confirmed Derek's identity. Derek had filed a complaint. The complaint was reviewed and dismissed within 2 weeks. The second was a man named Anthony Price, who owned a barbershop 3 blocks from the police station. 6 months before Marcus's encounter, Cole had detained Anthony for matching a description while Anthony was sweeping his own sidewalk at 8 o'clock in the morning. Cole had placed Anthony in handcuffs, searched his pockets, and released him only after another officer recognized Anthony from the neighborhood. Anthony had filed a complaint. That complaint was also reviewed and dismissed. The pattern was clear. Cole targeted black business owners. He fabricated justifications. He escalated encounters without cause. And when complaints were filed, the system absorbed them without consequence. Simone Grant subpoenaed the department's internal records. She found that Cole had received no additional training after the first complaint. No supervisor had spoken with him after the second. His personnel file contained nothing but standard evaluations and average performance marks. The institution had protected him. Not through conspiracy, but through indifference. Through a system designed to make complaints disappear rather than investigate them. Through a culture that treated pattern recognition as inconvenient rather than essential. Derek Hollis agreed to provide a statement. Anthony Price did the same. Their accounts matched Marcus's in structure and detail. The same officer. The same tactics. The same disregard for identification and documentation. The same assumption that black men did not belong in their own spaces. The case grew larger than one citation. It became an indictment of a department that had failed, repeatedly, to hold its officers accountable. In October, federal civil rights monitors requested access to the department's complaint records. Local media began covering the story. The mayor's office issued a statement expressing concern and promising transparency. Cole retained a private attorney. He stopped appearing at the station. Colleagues who had previously defended him grew quiet. Settlement negotiations began in November. The department's lawyers proposed a confidential agreement, money in exchange for silence. Simone rejected it immediately. "My client is not interested in confidentiality," she said during a meeting with opposing counsel. "He is interested in accountability." The negotiations stalled. Simone prepared for trial. She compiled evidence, organized witness testimony, and built a case that would be difficult to dismiss or minimize. In late November, the department's position shifted. Their lawyers returned with a new offer. A public settlement. A formal apology. Policy changes. And a number that acknowledged the severity of what had occurred. $650,000. Marcus reviewed the terms with Simone. The money mattered less to him than the other provisions. The department would acknowledge wrongdoing publicly. Cole would be terminated, not reassigned. Mandatory bias training would be implemented for all officers. New protocols would be established for tracking complaint patterns. "This is more than most people get," Simone said. "This is more than most people ever get." Marcus signed the agreement on December 14th. The Greenville Police Department issued its public apology 3 days after the settlement was finalized. The statement acknowledged that Marcus Whitley had been subjected to unlawful detention, that Officer Brendan Cole had fabricated justification for the encounter, and that the department had failed to identify a pattern of misconduct that should have been addressed months earlier. Cole was terminated on December 18th. His badge was collected. His service weapon was returned to the department. 4 months out of the academy, his career ended before it truly began. The citation against Marcus, the $320 for disorderly conduct and failure to comply, was dismissed and expunged from all records. As if it had never existed. Except it had existed, and everyone who followed the case knew it. Marcus returned to his diner the morning after the announcement. He arrived at 5:45, as he always did. He unlocked the front door. He flipped the sign to open. He started the coffee and waited for his regulars to arrive. Jerry showed up at 6:10, same as always. He didn't say anything about the settlement or the news coverage. He just tied on his apron and started prepping the grill. The first regular came in at 6:30. Harold, who had been coming to Corner Booth Diner since Marcus opened the doors 11 years earlier. Harold sat in his usual booth, ordered his usual breakfast, and read his usual newspaper. "Saw your name in the paper," Harold said without looking up. "Yeah," Marcus replied. "Good for you." That was all. No grand speeches. No celebrations. Just acknowledgement from a man who had known Marcus for over a decade and understood what the victory meant without needing it explained. The days that followed were ordinary in the best possible way. Coffee was poured. Eggs were scrambled. Regulars came and went. The diner operated exactly as it had before March 12th, before Cole walked through the front door, Before Marcus learned what it felt like to be a stranger in his own building. But something had changed. Not in the diner itself, but in what it represented. Marcus had refused to stay silent. He had refused to pay a fine for a crime he did not commit. He had refused to accept that being black in his own business was grounds for suspicion. And because he refused, a pattern was exposed. An officer was removed. A department was forced to confront its failures. The security camera above the back door remained in place. Marcus checked it every few weeks to make sure it was functioning properly. He never forgot that the camera was the only reason anyone believed him. Without that footage, his word would have stood against Cole's, and history suggested how that contest usually ended. $650,000 could not undo what happened that morning. It could not erase the cold metal of the patrol car hood against his palms. It could not unsee the passing driver who stared at him like he was a criminal. It could not restore the dignity that was stripped away before the sun fully rose. But it could mean something. It could mean that the next Marcus Whitley might face a different outcome. That the next complaint might be investigated rather than dismissed. That the next officer with a pattern might be stopped before the pattern grew. Marcus never wanted to be part of a lawsuit. He just wanted to run his diner. But he understood something that morning with his hands pressed against that hood's silence would have meant acceptance. And acceptance was something Marcus could not live with. Corner Booth Diner still opens at 5:45 every morning. The coffee still tastes the same. The regulars still know they are welcome. And above the back door, a small camera keeps recording. Just in case. How many others exist without cameras? How many have stood where Marcus stood, with no footage, no witnesses, no attorney willing to take the case? How many paid the fine because fighting back felt impossible? Justice required Marcus to be exceptional. 11 years of ownership. A spotless record. A security camera. A paper trail of lies. A skilled attorney. 9 months of effort. Most people do not have all of those things. Most people do not have any of them. The uncomfortable truth is this. Cole was not fired because he was wrong. He was fired because he got caught. How many never get caught? How many are still wearing badges right now?